Hi class. So in this short lecture, I want to talk a little bit about essay writing and basically do a review or introduce you to the concept of the five-part essay. So let's take a look at what I mean when I say five-part essay. So the typical standard English or other essay has five parts to it, and this is kind of the pattern or template that a lot of students learn how to write an essay using this model or approach. And there's going to be five parts to your essay. So part one is your introduction paragraph, and that introduces the topic of the essay. It also contains the most important part of an essay, arguably, the thesis statement, which is what your argument is stating, or where your argument is stated. And then it's going to have body paragraphs. So these are the body of your essay, the main content where you're going to be proving your argument and including all of that evidence, which includes direct quotations, as well as any research that you've done. All of that gets placed in the body of the essay. And in a five-part essay, typically you have key points, three main key points that you're going to use to prove your thesis statement or argument. But honestly, you don't have to stick to the three paragraphs. If you had two body paragraphs, if you had four body paragraphs, all of that is variable in an essay. Especially if you get a longer assignment, like if you had to do a 1,000-word essay or 2,000-word essay, you can't really stick to this simple model. But for now, we're writing really cute, short 500-word essays, and it's perfect for this style or this template of doing a five-part essay. So for the purposes of our class, I think you should stick to the five-part essay when you're writing a 500-word essay, which we are for our assignments in this class. And then the fifth part of your essay is the conclusion paragraph, and altogether that forms five parts of the essay. The introduction paragraph, let's take a closer look at that part. So the introduction paragraph, you'll remember it's sort of drawn as a big inverted triangle, which corresponds to what you do in an introduction, which is you start very broadly. Usually you add a topic sentence or a hook that draws your readers in. So sentence one is often called your hook because you're hooking your reader and dragging them along through the rest of your essay. So the hook is kind of supposed to be an engaging or controversial or inspiring or something that draws the reader in to want to read more. It could be, an opening sentence that asks a question. It could be an inspiring quote. It could be a scenario or a story. It's really open to the writer how they want to appeal or draw the reader in. And then usually for a literary analysis essay, you might want to provide a little bit of context or information about either the topic or the history or the background of the author, because our stories do take place within a time and place, and the author's life sometimes can be interesting or informative. So you might add 2 to 3 sentences to just bulk up, be a little bit of filler for the introduction, so it's not too short. And then you're going to add your thesis statement, and this is kind of the most important part, arguably, in an essay. It's where you, as the writer, are stating your purpose for writing it. You're stating your argument that you're going to prove, and you're going to again, present this in a really succinct 1 or 2 sentences at the most statement of what this paper is going to argue or prove. So your thesis statement is probably the trickiest part for students, because we do want to kind of create an argument. Sometimes we just create a purpose statement and not an argument, but the best thesis statements, the most academic ones, will present an original argument or take on the topic. It won't just be an exploration. It will be an argument that can be proven, an argument that can be debated against, an argument that needs evidence to support it. So that's kind of the tricky thing, that students can learn how to, improve the quality of their papers by making their thesis statement a strong argument. And then optionally, but I think is important as well, is sentence 5. The last sentence of your intro should be a kind of map or outline or signposting of what's to come in the rest of the paper. And this can be a list of your body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3. What are those 3 key points that you're going to go on to discuss that are proving your thesis statement? So the final sentence, it might be sentence 5, it might be sentence 7, who knows how long your intro is. But it's kind of the signposting for what's to come and a list of those 3 key points. So this list, or the key points, should line up with body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3. It should all align and be in the same order as introduced in your intro. So that's the basic introduction paragraph model. And again, it's a little bit of flexibility. Like, you don't have to have just 5 sentences, but that's kind of a good place to aim for. You don't want it to be too short. You don't want it to be too long. Usually an introduction is just 1 paragraph, not 2 or more. So try to stick to those rules for at least, your first paper in the class. Write 1 introduction paragraph, have it contain a thesis statement, have it do a little bit of signposting of what's to come in the paper, have it have a hook, and maybe provide a little bit of filler or context background information in there. But try to follow some of these rules when you're writing your introduction paragraph. And then the body paragraphs are where you're going to have the main content of your essay. So this is the paragraphs that include all of your evidence and how you're going to prove your argument, your thesis statement. And they have their own structure and organization. So a body paragraph, again, it should flow. One should flow to the next, and it should make sense in terms of your argument. Should connect all of the body paragraphs together. So there should be some sort of continuity between all of the body paragraphs. They shouldn't just be sort of standalone bits and pieces. You want your transition words to be used to create a kind of connection between each body paragraph, and make sure that each body paragraph is also related back to the thesis statements and those 3 key points you've set up. Your topic sentence, so this is kind of the first sentence of your paragraph. It tells us what this paragraph is going to be arguing or what it's about. So it's usually quite general, but not so general that it's not about the text or not about the topic. But it's basically the main idea of what this paragraph will be about. And you want to make sure that you're adding evidence. Evidence. Very important for every essay that you're going to write. Evidence What that means is direct quotations from the text you're studying. It could also be evidence from research that you've done outside of the main course reading. Whichever it is, you need to cite it in the paragraph and make sure that you are adding brackets, adding the information, the author's name, where you found that source. So when you add supporting evidence, you're also wanting or should comment on it, explain it in your own words, add a little bit of commentary to note how this evidence proves your thesis statement and why you've included it in your paper. So evidence needs to be selected strategically. It shouldn't just be any random quote that you found from the text thrown into your essay. It needs to be a quote that proves your point. So you need to do a little bit of explanation, analysis, interpretation of the quotes that you've included and how the quote relates or proves your thesis statement or argument. And when I say evidence, direct evidence is a direct quotation. Indirect evidence is kind of paraphrasing in your own words information that happened in the story. But even if you do that, paraphrasing, if it's paraphrasing of information that you got from a dictionary or online, you should cite it. So make sure if it's a dictionary definition that you're citing, put Webster's dictionary in there or whatever source that you're using or getting your information from, cite it. Because that's where, you get in trouble for plagiarism if you're taking information, putting it in your essay and not properly attributing that information to the original source. Okay, so to end your body paragraph, you need a concluding sentence. Sometimes students add like a transition into their next point, but usually I use transitions to start a paragraph, not to end a paragraph. I think it's a little bit more difficult to introduce a new point in a paragraph at the end. It can be really kind of awkward, but it's up to you where you place your transitions. It's kind of a stylistic choice that you make as the author. But adding a concluding sentence basically just wraps up the paragraph, closure, gives closure to it, sums up the main point. So it should kind of connect to your topic sentence because you're introducing your main point in the topic sentence and concluding or summarizing the main point in the concluding sentence. And then the fifth paragraph, as I mentioned here, your body paragraphs, I said 3 body paragraphs in a 5-paragraph essay, but if you are, again, writing a longer paper, or if it makes sense to only have 2 body paragraphs, again, that is the variable. You can change the amount of paragraphs that you include in the middle. But for our purposes, I'm saying 3 paragraphs, 3 key points. Try to follow that model, and I think you'll create a strong, template that you can use for the rest of your essay writing. And then finally, our conclusion paragraph. So you have to end your essay with a conclusion paragraph. And sometimes students just sort of end their essay without any concluding thoughts, and it does sort of feel cut off or incomplete. So you do kind of need a closure or conclusion, a paragraph at the end of your paper to really just summarize, restate your argument and what you've, the key points that you've discussed in the paper to prove your thesis. So it's kind of redundant, like you're saying something you've already said before, but that's kind of the point of the conclusion, is just to sort of restate, make it really clear to your reader, this was the question I was looking at, or this was my thesis statement. These were the key points that I discussed, and this is why this topic is important, or why we should be studying this text or why you should be reading my paper. So it kind of summarizes all of that information in a neat little paragraph. And you want, ideally, your conclusion to have some impact. You want to explain why what you've said is important, or reflect as a whole on what you've done or what you've written about. You don't want to add new information, so you don't want to add a bunch of new evidence, add a bunch of quotes. That's not what the conclusion is for. You should have included that info in a body paragraph. The conclusion is really just for summary and reflection on the topic as a whole, contemplating, what you've stated thus far, and maybe reflecting on the larger purpose or meaning of the text. Okay, so for thesis statements, these are some examples of literary style thesis statements. So if you're writing an essay on a text, a piece of literature, a poem, a short story, a novel, these are some examples of thesis statements that you might, want to emulate or follow along. So these are just a couple of examples. So a thesis statement for a literary text usually includes the title of the text you're studying. So you've identified the name of the text. You've also introduced the full name of the author that you're studying. And then you're going to present your argument. So in this case, this student is writing about Eudora Welty's A Worn Path. And the argument is that in A Worn Path, Eudora Welty creates a fictional character in Phoenix Jackson, whose determination, faith, and cunning illustrate the indomitable human spirit. So their argument is that this character, Phoenix Jackson, has the three characteristics, and that all these characteristics show this theme of the strength of the human spirit. So that's kind of their argument. But you'll see they identify 3 key points, which in a 5-part essay is, what you want to do. You want to have sort of 3 main points in your thesis statement that you're going to go on to discuss each one individually in a body paragraph. So for this thesis statement, body paragraph number 1 is going to be about determination. Body paragraph number 2 is going to be about faith. And body paragraph 3 is going to be about cunning in this character, and explain each of those points separately while also proving this thesis as a whole. So you can kind of emulate this model or this template for a thesis statement with your own information. So think of what your 3 key points are going to be first, and then kind of plug them in to create a thesis statement for your 5-part essay. In this one, so the character of the nurse in Romeo and Juliet serves as a foil to young Juliet, delights us with her warm and earthly wit, and helps realize the tragic catastrophe. So this thesis statement is focusing on one character, the nurse, in the play Romeo and Juliet. It could have the author's name as well, so there's no mention of William Shakespeare in here, but I would assume that this person's introduction has introduced William Shakespeare before this statement is stated. And then they're saying that this character serves as a foil. So you would have to know what a foil character is, but that's maybe a term we'll come across when we do our study of A Doll's House, a play. But it's using a kind of a literary device, in this case a foil character. But she's setting up, or this character, or the student is setting up 3 points. So she serves as a foil to young Juliet is 1 point. She delights us with her warm and earthly wit, 2 points. And then helps realize the tragic catastrophe, 3 points. So again, we have a setup of 3 things to prove our thesis. And then this one is, again, another thesis. A close look at many details in the story of an hour reveals how language, institutions, and expected demeanor suppress the natural desires and aspirations of women. So again, you couldn't mention the author's name in completion in your thesis, or at least somewhere in your intro. And then again, set up those 3 key points. So in this case, we have language is 1 point, institutions is a 2nd point, and then expected demeanor is your 3rd point. And then your argument here is that their desires and aspirations are suppressed. So that's kind of what this person wants to prove, but they're using each of these 3 points to prove that argument. Okay, so it takes some practice, and you might have to look at a couple of examples like these ones to sort of craft your own thesis statement, but these are some good examples of how to do that using that 3-point method. And then just some tips. It's a good idea to mention the author's full name in your intro or in the thesis statement. So you would use both first and last name. For the rest of the essay, though, you don't have to keep repeating first and last name. You would just use the last name only after you've introduced their first name completely. And it's a good idea to include the title of the literature that you're studying. So is it a poem? Is it a short story? Is it a play? Depending on the text that you're studying, there's different rules for formatting. If it's in quotes, it's a poem or a short story. If it's in italics, it's a play or a longer work, a film or a novel. And then you want to narrow down which characters you're going to study or talk about in your essay. So is it Romeo? Is it Juliet? Is it the main character or the protagonist? Or is it a side character? Is it, one of the minor characters or foil characters? So you want to make sure that you're limiting the scope of your study in your essay. You want to be narrowing, not broadening, for a thesis statement. Okay, and then if you have trouble creating an argument and you don't know what something, you don't know how to argue something, you could start by writing a sentence that says, I argue that, or try to use the word because in there, and that could help you sculpt or create an argument. But an argument is something that can be debated. Like somebody might argue against you, or they might say, no, I disagree. So you want to make sure that you're creating an argument, and you can do that by sort of picking a character or picking a topic that is not obvious, something that might be under the radar, like something that people maybe not immediately pick up on when they read or watch the text. So it could be an unusual take or an original look at the text to create an argument, and that's ideal, like to find some new take on a literary text. But it's really hard to find something original about Romeo and Juliet when it's been written about forever. So really you want to just maybe focus on analyzing one person or one character, or maybe a minor character or a minor little detail in the text, and really elaborate on that. So that's something you think of to be original or creative. Or start with this I argue that statement and try to present your thesis first as an argument, and then edit it, revise it to be more of a formal thesis statement like the ones above here. And then the other thing you can do is just think about those 3 points. Brainstorm 3 points that you want to talk about, and then try to find supporting evidence in the text to talk about, include in your paper. and try to plug those 3 points into a sentence, one sentence that sums up what it is you're trying to say about this text. But it is tricky. It takes some practice to get good at writing a thesis statement. And, you know, even I still struggle with like writing a thesis statement that's an argument and that's original and unique because, you know, obviously literature has been studied and talked about, and, you know, especially when you're doing classic texts, it's really hard to find an original argument. So what you can best do is just come up with your 3 key points and then sort of build off of that to create a thesis statement. Okay, I think we'll wrap up this video for now, but if you have any questions about the 5-part essay, let me know, and have a good rest of your day.